Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This extraordinary day of presentations is going to continue with, dare say another extraordinary presentation. Well, that's not even strong enough words. I don't have words to tell you how incredible this is going to be. Dr. Richard Boylan is back with us, and we are privileged that today he is going to go into the Black Vaults. He is going to tell us information gleaned primarily from Colonel Steve Wilson. Colonel Wilson worked in the Black Projects, and ladies and gentlemen, this is a first time ever release of information that you won't sleep tonight when you hear it. The one, the only, Dr. Richard Boylan.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. Welcome, humans, hybrids, star visitors appearing as humans, and my special invited guests, the brave men and women who dared to come out from the Military Intelligence Unit at Nellis Air Force Base, Las Vegas, to hear stuff for which they may not otherwise have proper clearances. I'm going to share with you information about Colonel Steve Wilson, the United States Air Force, and his interesting career, to put it mildly, major elements of which took place 190 miles north of here at Site 4, Nellis Air Force Range. But I'm also going to present the Colonel as an early example of a star seed, indeed a star kid grown up. Many of you who've heard me talk before know that my primary focus at this point in my life's mission is working with the star kids, the star seeds, those human beings who've been transformed by contact from the star visitors. But Colonel Wilson goes way back. If he were alive today, he would be 74. So I'm going to spin all this into a coherent whole, hopefully, and I think you will get a picture that your government knows a whole lot more about this than many people have ever dreamed. Let me start with putting the star seed aspect of Colonel Wilson into some context. And I know there are many star kids and star seeds in this room. But bear with me, because some people are not familiar with this aspect of human history at this point. Let me then give you the short revised history of the human race. There are a number of star visitor civilizations out there, probably on the order of billions. The ones of relevant interest to us are the ones in our galaxy. Many civilizations have evolved long ago, some being millions of years old. And some of these civilizations, having developed their own worlds to an exquisite point, felt moved to go out into the universe and try and do some good elsewhere. At a point in time, many eons back, contact with Earth began. And it was determined that it was suitable for intelligent life to develop. And so some primate stock was identified, gene spliced, about our best estimate from the mitochondrial research of the anthropologists and molecular biologists about 275,000 years ago. Homo sapiens sapiens emerged with no immediate predecessor other than the primate stock that provided the majority of the DNA genome. The visitors watched the development of this first iteration of intelligent life on Earth for approximately 100,000 years, and then decided it needed an upgrading. And so about 130,000 years ago, some additional gene splicing took place, and voila, we have Homo sapiens sapiens, modern human. And 130,000 years roll by with that model in operation, and as you know from our history, many interesting things have happened. We've developed to high points of civilization and crashed several times, and are now at what we presume to be a very high level of technological civilization. Since it's not going to be primarily a talk on starseeds, I'm going to abbreviate this part. Suffice to say that while we reached a very high level of technological sophistication, our spiritual and metaphysical development in the whole has not kept pace. True, we've gone beyond solving disputes with stone clubs. Now we use atomic bombs. More technologically sophisticated, but not necessarily a major moral improvement. And so they determined that another tweaking of the recipe was in order. Some few individuals going back a ways demonstrate early versions of starseed, the third iteration of Homo sapiens sapiens, what the General Council of the Smithsonian Institute is called Homo Alteria Spatialis. In other words, translated as transformed cosmic human. Nikola Tesla certainly was one such, Albert Einstein another, Jane Addams, the Nobel Peace Prize winning crusader for peace and democracy another, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Schweitzer, more recently Mother Teresa. But an interesting thing happened around the 1980s, late 1980s. The wave of these transformed humans coming in as small children really started to develop and become noticeable. And if I were to graph that wave from that era to now, it would be like this. Now the vast majority of children being born are star kids. What are these star kids and starseed adults? They are people who have been transformed. Either their parents were visited and some reproductive material tweaked and replaced, and the ensuing child that the parents later go on to have is much more intelligent, has double handfuls of psychic abilities, is cosmic-minded, highly sensitive, spiritually attuned, extraordinary children. Let me give you just a few brief examples of some of the abilities these children have, and starseed adults. In other cases, some of the origin of some of these star kids and starseeds is reincarnation. A personality, consciousness, soul that was a star visitor in a previous incarnation comes in as a human this time, but retains enough of the consciousness and energy from previous existence to operate at a higher level here. And these are what I call missionary incarnations. The person comes in deliberately to try and be of help and raise the consciousness level in humanity as we head through these times of transition between now and 2012. What are some of the attributes of these star kids and star seeds? Well, they do things like mental telepathy, precognition, knowing the future, telekinesis, moving objects by focused mental effort, intuitiveness, just picking up and reading things, seeing auras and knowing what the aura has to say, doing psychic diagnosis and healing, remote viewing, making oneself invisible, at least at a mental level, teleportation of an object from one place to another, levitation, mental influencing through telepathy, doing adjustment, positive adjustment energy to the earth, dilating time or contracting time, being pre-sensitive to earthquakes or human disasters, being aware of beings or things across dimensions, out-of-body travel, maintaining close connection to a star visitor that serves as a kind of personal mentor or guide. Okay, it's far too compact, but that, in a nutshell, is the Starseed Star-Kid phenomenon. Now I want to talk about Colonel Steve Wilson. With his permission, I wrote a biography based on his notes, and I'm going to give you salient pieces of his life story leading up to and putting into context his work on Project Pounce and at S4 base north of here. He entered the Air Force at the age of 13. His kind of adoptive mother lied for him and told the Air Force he was 16. In those days, with parental permission, they accepted such recruits. He worked hard at making improvements to himself, went through Air Force High School, 2-year college degree, aircraft mechanics school, flight engineer school, got certified in these specialties, moved on to staff sergeant, and appointment to Air Cadet School at Kelly Air Force Base. He, to make a long story short, was assigned to the Korea War Theater and flew a fighter jet down Mig Alley, taking dogfights on with communist jets. During this tour of duty, an extraordinary episode happened which amazed everybody in his company and undoubtedly got the attention of the Pentagon and the NSA in Washington. He was doing a bombing run and he caught aircraft fire from the ground. He got shot in the abdomen, saw blood coming out, and radioed to the tower that he was wounded and he wasn't going to make it come back. Then he blanked out. 3 days later, if you know a Sabre jet, you know they do not have more than several hours fuel flight capacity. 3 days later, the control tower at the 67th Fighter Squadron base in Korea saw an unusual sight. Colonel Wilson's plane was coming in for a landing, even though the jet engine was not running. If you know anything about jets, they're not very airworthy when they're not powered. They're not like propeller planes, some of which can do a good coasting. The fuselage on his jet was surrounded by a strange greenish light. Flight line personnel were all looked on in amazement as the plane made a perfect dead stick landing. And they rushed out to the plane and they found Lieutenant Wilson inside, unconscious. Obviously, someone else was steering the plane in and had held it in the air for 3 days. He was given immediately some numerous tests and was debriefed by a mystery team, undoubtedly from Washington. They administered testing and they found out that his already very high IQ of 162 had now jumped to 232. So something happened during those 3 days he was missing. In addition, his wound was practically healed when he landed. This is one of the first signs of Star Kid or Star Visitor attributes, rapid healing from wounds. Another is visible signs of Star Visitor intervention. Being brought in for a landing while unconscious is clearly that. Extreme intelligence is another such sign. Jumps in mental functioning after a contact experience, another. Increased ESP functioning is another. 2 months later, Wilson, back in service, was with his squadron mates when his friend Chuck another pilot was shot down during an aerial dogfight over Korea. Wilson and the other squadron watched him go down and disappear. They banked around to return to base, but Wilson heard the down pilot's voice in his head, incoming telepathy. The guy was crying for help, so Wilson was startled, but he heard the voice again, and he broke formation and descended down to the jungle canopy looking for him. Squadron commander told him to get back in formation, but he pretended his radio didn't work. He paid more attention to what he was getting from Chuck telepathically. So he flew real low over the ground. He saw a clearing where he got the sense he was coming from and landed there. And when he got there, he could see the plane down in under some trees. And he jumped out, went over to the wreckage, pulled Chuck out, and put him in his cockpit, double mated on the seat there, and flew the plane back. 46 days later, he switched roles. Now he was the pilot needing a rescue. He was over enemy territory, developed engine trouble, was forced to land. The enemy saw him, started coming, and he burned up the plane so they wouldn't have anything they could take back, analyze. He was put in a tiger cage in a concentration camp and tortured for several months. Finally, he and another person couldn't take it any longer, broke out, killed 2 of the guards, crawled on their belly through the jungle to avoid detection, and finally got over to friendly lines. After Korean War duty, he was assigned as commander of the Tactical Flight Squadron at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, and then deployed to Guantanamo, Cuba, and from there had picket duty over Houston when President Kennedy was doing his tour of the South in 1963. Apparently Kennedy was going to go to Houston next after Dallas, but he never made it. When the pilots heard the assassination over their phones, they broke back to base. Right after that, he was assigned to Majestic 12, as it was called in those days, the UFO cover-up organization or UFO information management organization, and became a major. After returning to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, he received top secret clearance, was commissioned as a major, indoctrinated into the UFO secrets kept by the Majestic 12 agency. He was shown the remains of extraterrestrials and the crashed UFOs from the Roswell incident in the latter 1947. They were all housed at Wright-Pat Air Force Base, Hangar 84, not Hangar 18. He was shown reports about the incident. He was informed that because of his special abilities, he was being assigned to Majestic 12. In other words, because he was what we would call today a starseed or star kid, these amped up psychic abilities. This has interesting implications for what the government knows and when did they know it. As part of his duties, he'd be assigned to the 1st Special Forces Air Command and undergo special training with Delta Force and then with the Black Berets. As if Delta Force weren't elite enough, there's another elite unit beyond them. His comments about that period are, I looked at these fellows I was to train with. Every one was a trained killer and assassin, but it still didn't prepare me for the MIBs, the Men in Black, the Wackenhut private security firm operatives with government covert projects contracts, and all the black ops that exist deep within the government. This was when I was told I would cease to exist. He was told his job was so secret that stops would be placed on all his records and whereabouts, and that he would be moved to Majestic 12. He was told that his telepathic ability was needed for something very special and that he would be on a need-to-know basis. He said, it made me feel very special, inflated my ego. Little did I know at the time that I would be involved in one of the most dastardly and heinous cover-ups the world has ever known. He's talking about the UFO cover-up. To think about it even today makes me sick to my stomach, but at that time in my life I felt I was serving my country. I knew nothing of the greed and power of a few men who were later to be known as MAJI, the top executives of Majestic 12. Finally, in the summer of '72, he's assigned to the 1st Special Forces Air Squadron at Vandenberg Air Force Base. And he was hardly there before a man flashing CIA identification came in and told him he needed to pack his bag, that there was a plane waiting that would be leaving in 20 minutes. He took off, and they flew to a place that we now know as Papoose Dry Lake Base, or S4, Nevada, deep within the Nellis Air Force Range. He says, even up close, the mountains and terrain looked barren. They walked about 300 yards from where they landed to a rock outcropping, and the other side, nestled between some large rocks, was an iron door with no handle. The CIA man opened the door. They went inside and down a tunnel. At the end of the passageway, Wilson glanced around and marveled at the size of the structure. He said, I could swear the whole damn mountain was hollow. Right down the middle was a runway. And at the end, huge doors that I later found out could be opened to allow the plane to take off right out of the mountain. So we're talking about S4 as a very huge, hollowed out place beneath the Papoose Mountains. I have a photo of Papoose Dry Lake. I'll try and bring it up here if we can go to slide mode. That's Colonel Wilson. That's his organization chart of the intelligence community as it applies to UFO matters particularly. That's his organization chart of Star Wars City, Colorado Springs, and adjacent installations. We'll talk, as we have time, more about that a little later. Notice that bottom sketch of a helicopter. We'll talk about that later. That's an anti-gravity helicopter. This is, of course, Area 51. And this is Papoose Dry Lake. If I have the orientation correct, I think the mountain behind the dry lake bed is the one that is hollowed out. The CIA man took Colonel Wilson down an elevator, a number of floors. He says, I don't know how many. I know from Command Sergeant Major Robert Dean telling me about Area 51 going down. I think Bob said 32 floors. There's little reason to believe Papoose would not be also very deep into the earth. He says the elevator moved with lightning speed. It descended so fast he almost lost his dinner. He was ushered out of the elevator and into an office to meet the full colonel in charge, which happened. And he was told of his duties and the plane schedules in and out of Nellis Air Force Base. And the colonel also told Lieutenant Colonel Wilson how to get there through the secret underground high-tech tunnel shuttle system connecting this installation with Nellis. So when you hear about underground tunnels, this one for sure exists. And it's used regularly by high-ranking officers to get from Nellis to S4 without having to travel on the surface or even hopping on a Janet airplane from McCarran to Groom Lake Strip. He was warned that everything he saw was top secret, that if he so much as breathed wrong or opened his mouth about anything, it would be his last breath. The major began his duties at the Papoose Lake installation, not knowing what existed 30 stories farther down. He was sitting in his office at S4 mulling this over one morning when a Lieutenant Colonel Bennett came in. By the way, Dr. Michael Wolf later told me about a general who he said he couldn't tell the name of, but it was close. He used Bunning as a close, I suspect it's the same guy. Anyway, this Lieutenant Colonel Bennett asked Wilson if he was busy and then ignored whatever he had to say back and said, let's go. They eventually wound up 2 stories down at the super secret S4 UFO technology level. I received independent corroboration from a high-ranking Air Force officer that this is indeed where captured UFOs are stored at S4. As they came out in the landing area there, Wilson saw 8 different kinds of UFOs. There were intellectual-looking people from all over the area. He guessed they were scientists. Then the colonel and the major went into a cubicle where there were about 20 other officers and civilians sitting around. All of a sudden, a woman came in the door who was at least 8 feet tall. Wilson stared at her very carefully. There was not an ounce of excess fat on her body, he recalls. She wore a strange-looking jumpsuit that had an HI pattern on the right side above the breast line. I think what it is an H and an I superimposed. At least that's what it would look like if it were English characters used. The woman had finely chiseled features. I'm quoting Wilson now. Her blonde hair cascaded neatly past her shoulders. Her eyes were the bluest blue I'd ever seen. Somehow she was different. Little did I know how different. She set a large crystal on the table, and without warning, her fingers began to glow as she ran them over this crystal. A 3D hologram began to form above it. I looked around the room and everybody else's mouth was hanging open, and then I noticed mine was hanging open too. Little did I realize that at that moment my life would be forever changed. My past teaching slipped from me as I stared. My whole concept of life did a 180-degree turn as I watched the hologram, complete with sound, unfold the mysteries of the past and the present and of other worlds. Colonel Wilson related that among the scenes which appeared in this hologram was the history of the Earth and of extraterrestrial involvement with the Earth. That involvement included fashioning the consciousness of Jesus and sending him to live among earthlings to point to a better way to understand life and to live. The extraterrestrial woman also showed the officers and scientists scenes from inhabited planets on other star systems. Wilson does not go into all the details of what he saw, but he says he was transformed by this experience. He says, when it was over, I knew that whatever part I had to play in all this, my life as I knew it had ended forever. He then was appointed executive officer of Project Pounce. This unit was created in the final days of December 1980. It's an elite group of Air Force Black Berets and military scientists who rush to the scene of any UFO crash, cordon off the area, retrieve the extraterrestrial spacecraft and any occupants, then sanitize the crash site back to its pre-crash appearance, and intimidate any outside witnesses into silence. At this point, Wilson became a colonel and received top secret Cosmic Q level 27 security clearance. He learned much about the inner workings of the MJ-12 agency. His UFO secrecy duties included interacting with covert MIB enforcement goons from the Wackenhut private security firm on contract to MJ-12. Hitmen, if you will, if somebody decides to talk. Wilson came to despise the Wackenhut killers. He learned about secret space warfare operations conducted by military astronauts trained at a covert Air Force Special Academy. He found out that these military astronauts fly US-manufactured anti-gravity aerospace craft, such as the 2-man Lockheed X-22A disc out of Vandenberg and Beale Air Force bases in California up into space. These military astronauts from time to time interdict UFOs that they're told is unfriendly and fire Star Wars weapons to disable or destroy them. I want to pause here and add a little background information to this. First of all, I'll give you the location of that Special Air Force Academy. I have it from my own reconnaissance and from an insider. inside information has to do that there's a special elevator in the library of the Air Force Academy that if you have the proper clearance, you can take down and go over to the Special Air Force Academy for the military astronauts flying anti-gravity craft that aren't supposed to exist. I did a recon of the back side of the Air Force Academy grounds, the west side, and if you notice very carefully at the right spots, kind of over from the academy itself into the hill, you will see odd power, ventilation, water, and other infrastructure elements slightly sticking out of the ground if you know where to look and are looking for it. Obviously, it's very adjacent to the academy, but far enough away to have its own separate existence, buried in the side of a hill. The other thing about the military astronauts, they only do their orders. They only know what they're told. And as will become clear from Colonel Wilson's comments a little later on, there's a secret cabal that is manipulating, trying to gain world power, has some of its operatives in place in the Special Studies Group, as Dr. Wolf described it, what used to be called the MJ-12 group that controls UFO information policy and actions. And they give, through their plants within the military, these military astronauts, false information that a given UFO is enemy and to be attacked. So we have Star Wars going on up there that is not responsive to command authority from the president. Wilson also learned some things about the top command of MAGI, M-A-J-I, the military agency for joint intelligence, including the identity of two of the executive board members, Chairman Henry Kissinger and advisory scientist Edward Teller, both of whom hold the topmost level 33 security clearances. He eventually learned about their avarice and hunger for power that sickened him and led to his desire to go public with his information, put it on the internet, and give it to me, knowing it would get out to the public. He discovered that the Magi were so powerful that they acted as though they were above the president and the laws of nature and mankind. To his distress, Wilson found out later that they were to be known as the New World Order. Finally, sickened of the unconstitutional and unethical activities of the Majestic 12 agency, Wilson got out after 40 years in the Air Force. He had more medals and commendation certificates than I'm sure you would care to have me read off. But I wanted to give you his final thoughts before he died in, I believe, 1998 in Arizona. After years of military intelligence career building by playing by the rules, Lieutenant Colonel in retirement displayed the highest patriotism of all, whistleblowing on the corrupt MJ-12 parallel government. He was stricken with cancer, and he decided that he would use his final years to go public. I want to give you his parting words. He said, "I have no feelings, truthfully. My association with the MAJI organization has left me dead inside. I feel myself still cold and calculating. I never let anyone get close to me. I feel like a human robot. I have killed mercilessly and lied for the good of the country, or so I believed at the time." His final comments cryptically hint at what everyone will soon know about extraterrestrial visitation and the profound changes society will make as this comes out in the open. He says, "The things I have seen are beyond human understanding and totally unbelievable. I only have a desire to help humanity somehow through what is bound to come." I've had some additional interchange with him before he went, and I want to share a few excerpts that I think may be of interest to you. In the Star Wars City organizational chart, I asked him, you identified an Air Force Special Academy that takes its orders from Star Wars City in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Now, Star Wars City is a compendium of Peterson Air Force Base, Schriever Air Force Base, the secret installations underneath Fort Carson, and of course, the Air Force installation within Cheyenne Mountain. That is where the next war will be fought, in space. And I asked him, is the Air Force Special Academy where military astronauts who are quietly sent up from Vandenberg Air Force Base while the press keeps the public's attention on the space shuttle operating from Cape Canaveral, Florida? He said, yes, Vandenberg and Beale Air Force Bases are both involved. Beale is, of course, north of Sacramento in California. Does the Air Force Special Academy have other functions? Wilson said, yes, it has other functions in Black Ops, but he didn't go into them. What vehicle do the military astronauts ascend into space and operate with? Wilson says, these are our two-man ultimate back-engineered UFOs and classified ultra-cosmic top secret. I penetrated a test canyon about 30 miles into the Nellis Range between Area 51 and the Tonopah Test Range one night after watching what I deemed to be a human anti-gravity craft laboring along the hilltops. I followed it in and saw it doing maneuvers in a test canyon about several hundred feet above the desert floor. It hovers and blinks off and on as it jumps from one position to another, has a bluish-white ionization glow around the disk as it's hovering. And then this test box canyon was rather small and had a few field lights on it so I could see. And I had binoculars, I was observing it. It would stop glowing here and jump over maybe 100 feet, 100 yards, depending, and reappear glowing again. Now, it's not a question of it turned the lights off and went across in the black night and then turned it back on, because there's enough ambient light, I would have seen an unlit metallic skin slide across. What I think is happening is that it's jumping across hyperspace and then reappearing at the new spot. I described this to Colonel Wilson. He said, oh yeah, that's the Lockheed X-22A. Now we have a serial number for one of our unacknowledged military anti-gravity discs. There is another craft everyone is familiar with that is anti-gravity as well, the B-2 stealth bomber. It is bimodal. It can take off and land in conventional jet power, but when it's operational and away from nosy civilians on the flight line, it goes into energized mode and loses most of its weight, probably on the order of 90%. I'm told it can fly around the world without refueling after shedding all that weight through anti-gravity. I had occasion to talk to an aerospace engineer a couple of weeks ago who works on the inside, and he is also an experiencer, indeed a starseed. And he told me he was aboard one of the Star Visitor craft and felt the feel of the energy field as they powered up into anti-gravity mode. And he also felt the feel of the field inside a B-2 when it switches from conventional jet to anti-gravity mode, I believe electrogravitic mode. And he said the feeling was identical. I went on to ask Colonel Wilson some more questions. In the Special Defense Initiative organization chart, there is a, I think it's back here, Special 1010 Special Security Squadron that bypasses the Air Force and reports directly to the National Reconnaissance Organization and to MAJI, MJ-12, if you will. And I asked him, is this specialized squadron composed of elite Delta Force, Air Force Black Berets? He said, no, this is the Wackenhut Agency and their killers. So we have in the organizational chart of the UFO and Star Wars organization a private contract agency whose job is to do hit jobs on anybody who talks. I asked him about Project Pounce. He said, Project Pounce does not exist as a unit per se. We all had other jobs and each came from our own area of expertise. No one knew the other and only came together on a crash retrieval assignment. Thus, the ultimate level of security was maintained. I asked him about security clearances within the, let's call it MJ-12 organization for familiarity. He says, Cosmic Q Level 33 is Majority Agency for Joint Intelligence, the Kingpin Group. Level 32 is MJ-12, the worker bees, if you will, in the cover-up. Level 31 is certain aircraft manufacturing personnel, such as, I would think, the executive, like Ben Rich used to be, of Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works in Palmdale, where they make anti-gravity craft, and the head of Northrop's facility, northwest of Lancaster in the mountains, where they manufacture anti-gravity craft. And I've talked to an executive of Boeing's Phantom Works up in the Seattle area, and they also work on anti-gravity craft manufacture. He says level 30 clearance, the first 4 officers of the Wackenhut organization have that, as well as top people in the Department of Defense and the National Security Council. Colonel Wilson said modestly, I was only level 27. That was as far as I could go. But as you can see, it was enough to learn an awful lot. Also on the Strategic Defense Initiative chart that Colonel Wilson drew up for me, there's a corporation known as Decision Science Applications Incorporated. And I told him, this sounds an awful lot like Science Applications International Corporation in San Diego, headed by Black Ops veteran Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, that makes the engines for the U.S. anti-gravity craft. I asked him, is this DSAI and the same as SAIC? He says, Defense Science Applications Incorporated is the group made up of all the heads of the military hardware manufacturing in the black area. By the way, I heard that Inman chairs that group. I talked to Dr. Michael Wolf about it, and he said, for all intents and purposes, DSAI and Science Applications International Corporation are one and the same, with military officers rotating into civilian corporation positions. And I asked him, what role do Dr. Henry Kissinger and Dr. Edward Teller play in this ultra-classified organization? And I said, you know, Dr. Teller cleared Department of Naval Intelligence physicist Bob Lazar to work at Area 51's S4 annex on back-engineered captured UFOs. And Dr. Kissinger's business office in New York has gotten quite threatening with a person who made inquiries into Kissinger's connection to the UFO cover-up. What light can you shed on these two men's involvement? He said, both are MJ-12 members, which number 36 in all as of 1994. It might interest you to know that they go back as far as Project Paperclip. That was the secret project to import Nazi scientists into America to jumpstart the American space program and rocket program. Even though they have histories before that, they do appear to have been at the University of Heidelberg in the same time period that they were supposed to be here in the US. Kissinger is a firm believer and key figure in MK Ultra. That is the classified mind control research and development the CIA was doing and continues to do to find ways to use psychotronic devices, selective use of drugs, hypnosis, signals of various frequencies to influence people's thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So Teller loves to play at it, but Kissinger is a key figure. That, to me, suggests there is a strong link between MKUltra and the black operations, the shadow government side of the UFO cover-up. It's all part of an effort to get the most advanced technology, namely stolen and back engineered from crashed UFOs, and the most diabolical human manipulation research from Nazi scientists perfected by American and Canadian contract scientists for mind control. And this represents sort of the software and hardware side of global domination, where indicated these kinds of, I will use the word evil men, are prepared to use the most exotic technology to try to influence people and bend people to their will. And if that doesn't work, they have fleets of advanced fighter craft, anti-gravity, able to go at enormous speeds to deflect weaponry by their shielding gravitational field, to be invisible because of their gravitational field that bends light and indeed even space-time, and operate with invincibility. A few little curiosity tidbits. The underground shuttle system. The shuttle does not just go from Nellis Air Force Base to S4 on the Nevada test site. Several sources state that McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop anti-gravity plants are connected underground by a super-fast tunnel system between themselves in the Mojave Desert area of Palmdale and Lancaster, and from there connected to Area 51 and other sensitive underground installations. Colonel Wilson says that the system consists of magnetically levitated trains zipping through almost vacuum tubes. In other words, these trains never rest on tracks. They magnetically hover above the ground. And these tubes they go through are evacuated of almost all air so that there's no air resistance. They can go faster than the fastest jetliner. It's called TOS, Trans-America Underground Subway System. The tunnels are excavated by nuclear subterranes, which can burn through rock and create 6 miles of tunnel a day. The colonel also furnished the answer to the mystery black helicopters spotted around this country and elsewhere, and their correlation to the so-called cattle mutilation sites. I'm going to bring up the helicopter. These aren't your ordinary helicopters. This is yet another U.S. anti-gravity craft, designated the XH-75D or the XH Shark, made by Teledyne Ryan Aeronautical Corporation of San Diego. He says that many of these XH-75Ds were assigned to the Delta National Reconnaissance Organization division that retrieves downed UFOs. Notice I said National Reconnaissance Organization. There's also a National Reconnaissance Office that coordinates satellite spying, but the organization is a separate organization. It hides under the same sounding name and the same initials NRO as a cover. Finally, Colonel Wilson says there's a super secret mobile unit within Delta Force, the National Reconnaissance Organization, that is deploying the equalizer. This is an exotic-looking electromagnetic pulse, 6-foot long, 1-foot diameter cannon mounted on a pedestal on the back of a military truck, which is used to shoot down UFOs using low-frequency pulse microwave energy. This equalizer, electromagnetic pulse weapon, is built by LTV, Ling Temco Voigt at Anaheim, California. You all know Colonel Donald Ware here is one of the officers of the organization here. At a previous talk, during the break time, he had a photograph of one of these portable electromagnetic weapons that was hitched to the back of a military unit, Jeep or Humvee. His interest in that is he was trying to help Leah Haley, who was taken aboard a UFO with some other experiences for a conference with the star visitors when the scout craft was shot down by one of these EMPs in Florida, in the Panhandle near Gulf Breeze, on the beach there at Navarro. And Colonel opined that this very possibly was the weapon used to bring down that scout craft. A few tidbits about the MJ-12 organization. It was established by President Truman on September 24, 1947. This is from Colonel Wilson. Set up inside the National Security Council by President Eisenhower in 1954 by a secret executive order number 5412. MJ-12 was the name of a secret control group originally inside the Jason Society. This was a group of scholars that President Eisenhower commissioned under the leadership of the director of CIA and Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger, to sift through all the facts, evidence, technology, lies, and deceptions and find the truth of the alien question. Majority Agency for Joint Intelligence, or MAJI, gathers all the information, disinformation, and intelligence on UFO matters. It operates in conjunction with the CIA, National Security Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Office of Naval Intelligence. It's a very powerful organization. All alien projects are under its control. It's responsible only to MJ-12. MAGIC is the security classification and clearance for all alien-related material, projects, and information. Let's put this together. There are some very interesting and important implications. I know from talking to starseeds who were star kids in the 50s and 60s that the government is aware that there were transformed, highly advanced kids even as early as the 50s and 60s. There weren't anything like the number there are now, but there were some. Dr. Michael Wolff is one, Colonel Wilson, another. They were aware that these people were the way they are because of either their parents' contact with star visitors during encounters or other reasons. I presume they also are aware of the incarnational route that this transformation happens. As far back as the Vietnam War, and very likely earlier, people were being recruited for special operations having to do with UFOs and contact with the star visitors, precisely because the individual was a starseed. This applies not only to Wilson and Dr. Michael Wolff, but Tech Sergeant Dan Sherman, thank you, Air Force NSA, whose telepathy abilities with the extraterrestrials were coveted by NSA to find out what, be a communication link. I've talked to numerous people high in defense contracting and university technical departments working in black projects who have had visits, are experiencers, many of whom are starseeds. And they have the impression that their superiors are aware of this, and they also, in many cases, have the impression that that's why they have the job they have. Well, you may say the government's trying to have it both ways. It's trying to deny UFOs exist while it's utilizing people who've been transformed by contract to form the brightest and best on the inner circle to try and figure out advanced technology and to form communication links with the star visitors. That's right, the government's trying to have it both ways. I hope this is not a flash bulletin for you. What is important is that we move beyond kowtowing to the official denials because we know better. If everybody in the United States attended this Congress from last Saturday to this Saturday, or last Sunday to this Saturday, the UFO cover-up would be over. I would think a reasonable person, that's the legal standard in court, a reasonable person exposed to this much information would have to deduce that some of it is true, and therefore the government's full of shit. If this Congress were telescoped into a edited package and put on primetime network news slot night after night for about a 2-week sequence, the UFO cover-up would be over. The geoplutocrats who run the cabal aren't about to let that happen. But people power. If it can work in Bosnia, if it can work in Lebanon, if it can work in Iraq, it sure as hell can work in America. I think we need to stop enabling the UFO cover-up by denial, by acting as if they're right and we better keep it quiet and mumble among ourselves because reasonable people don't believe this. I think we need to act as if it is fact, as if it is growing public knowledge, and thereby make it so. When enough people step forward and talk to their friends, their neighbors, their co-workers, people in their organizations, matter-of-factly about this as much as, you saw an interesting contrail the other day, or the political news on the other side of the world, just matter of fact, you normalize it, you bring it out of the closet, the society is forced to deal with it when everybody's talking about it. I have my suspicions about why Colonel Wilson died of cancer. I suspect he was given his cancer. All it takes is a microscopic speck of plutonium inhaled into the lungs and you're gone. 0 to 6 weeks, you're bye-bye. There are many ways to accelerate a person's demise. But whether it was nature or a hit job, the man, extraordinary courage of going public with stuff which he knew was his death warrant and spilling his guts, and I think you've heard in this last hour a lot of guts spill, is an example and a role model for us about stepping up to the plate. I told Bob Dean, who's here among us, Command Sergeant Major Robert Dean, U.S. Army retired, NATO retired, that I, at a previous International UFO Congress, told him that he should be honored for being one of the first high-ranking military officers to step up to the plate and out UFO reality and what he'd come to know in the course of his military duties. Wilson's another one. Colonel Dr. Michael Wolff is another one. If these men can put their lives on the line, certainly we can have a little cocktail chatter with our friends and bring this stuff into mainstream discussion. Okay, well, thank you very much for your patience.